Hello, everybody. It's me, Shannon LaBruyere, and I am live and loving it tonight. It is Sunday, August 11th, 2019, 7 p.m. Eastern, and I am in one of my favorite places to be, which is in my office, talking to the people that want to learn and grow and thrive in change. Chris Lombard, so glad you're here. Welcome, welcome. Say hi to Mary Lou. Gina, yay! I haven't seen you here live in a bit. Thanks for being here. It's awesome. You guys are great. And I don't just say that lightly. I say that because I know that people who are intentionally taking time out of their schedule to engage with a group like this that's talking about things like, how do I get better? How do I change? How do I lean in to growth and personal development? That takes some effort. So you are great, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. So before I get too far tonight, I want to warn everybody that I have two pets, Zippy and Teddy, and I had to leave my office door open because my husband isn't home. And if I shut my office door and I was in here talking, they would torment me and pester me and make it impossible for me to share with you. So I left the door open, but that means that Zippy thinks I'm talking to her and she's going to be being very sweet. Say hi, everybody. Say hi. Yeah, she's really not into you guys, but she likes me, so that's a good thing. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. Even if we get interrupted by a dog or a cat, that's okay because we're among friends, right? Awesome. All right, next thing I want to mention is thank you to everybody who has gone on to YouTube and followed my channel, because that is getting me closer and closer to being able to name it something relevant, and you're a part of that, so I appreciate it. The upside for you is that if you're following my YouTube channel, you will get notified when new videos are there, and you won't have to necessarily scroll through this whole Facebook feed looking for back episodes of Sunday Night Live. So, with that, I want to get started. Tonight, I want to talk about culture. Not the kind of culture that you get dressed up and go to the opera and drink your tea with your pinky finger out, although certainly that's part of some people's culture. But whether you consider yourself to be a classy person or you consider yourself to be not so classy, maybe a little rough around the edges, you're still a part of a culture. Missy, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for jumping on. Thank you. We're a part of a culture whether we are intending to be part of a culture or not. And then, if you want to get really meta about it, we're a part of a culture. If we say we're not part of a culture, we're a part of the counterculture, which is actually a culture. So no matter how we try to position ourselves, we are part of a culture, and culture impacts us. We are impacted by our culture, not just the culture of our communities, the culture of our families, the culture of our school, the culture of our church, the culture of our workplace. So culture it's impossible to separate us from culture. Not only does it impact us, but we are impacting culture because we're a part of it. So this is what the dictionary says about culture. This is how it defines it. It says, culture is the customs, the attitudes, and the behaviors of a particular social group. And like I said, that social group could be any group. It could be the group you choose or the group you don't. Lorraine, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome. Thanks for jumping on. So we're talking about culture, the customs, the attitudes, and the behavior of a particular social group and how we fit into that. We don't automatically... Ooh, Dion Pittman is here. Dion is in the house. I am so glad. Okay, so now I really have to stay on track here. Okay, we don't choose our culture, at least not at first, but we certainly have some choices when it comes to the culture. And I've just been thinking about this a lot because I'm realizing that there are certain things that I assume that people understand about me. I assume that people understand about my family because I am so immersed in this is how we do things that it never even occurs to me that other people don't do things that way. I don't know if any of you had culture shock when you first got married, but when I first got married, I had culture shock. My family was very, very committed to being at every event ever. So if you had a birthday, my whole family is going to show up if you invited them. If you had a school play or a baseball game, whatever that was, as many of my family members as possible were going to show up to that game. In my husband's family, it wasn't quite like that. So they did a lot of their activities independently for the love of doing them themselves. They didn't always have their family showing up automatically. Another big difference was in my family, I just assumed that if I needed help, they would come help me. I would just tell them, I need help. For example, I was moving. We moved out of our little mobile home and had stayed with Ken's mom and dad for a while we were getting our new house. It was time to move in, and my assumption, and it was way off base, based on my culture, my assumption was that his family was going to drop everything and help us move whatever day I selected. I didn't consult anybody. I didn't ask if they were available. It was so disrespectful. My family, on the other hand, wouldn't have felt disrespected at all. And they would have just been like, yeah, we'll be there, whatever. Two different cultures, neither of them bad, but different. They were each different. And my assumption that I didn't have to give them fair warning or give them some notice so they could check their calendar, assuming that they would just drop everything, that was naive on my part. And a lot of it was because, not because I was terrible and rude, a lot of it was because that was a whole different paradigm than what I was used to. That wasn't the culture that I was accustomed to. I was making assumptions based on my culture, and I didn't even stop to think there might be alternatives. So why am I thinking about this? Part of it is because there are a lot of things that we've learned by osmosis through our culture that we might not be giving any thought to at all. And as you know, I am a big fan of being intentional about our mindsets, about what we believe, being thoughtful about how we live our lives, how we make our decisions. And that's not always something that's obvious to people, especially if their culture doesn't support it. If you don't come from a culture that encourages you to do that, then you're going to be less likely to do it. Does that make sense? I think so. Shay, I am glad you're here. Thank you for being here. All right, so we are impacted by culture. We also are a part of the culture, and we absorb things in our culture, and if we're not careful, we will start living our lives based on assumptions that we inherited from our parents or our grandparents or from the people who had already worked at the company that we went to work for. They'd been there for 30 years and we were new, and we just sort of believed them. So easy to just melt into a culture without being intentional about what is it telling me? What are some of the messages it's sending me? And so I have a list here. I have a list of assumptions, if you will, that culture handed me or handed some of the people I know based on my conversations with some of my clients, with some of my friends. These are some assumptions that might ring true to you that your culture just handed over to you that you might not even be aware are out there. You might not even be aware that they're driving your decision making. So here's one. How about this one? All you got to do is work hard and you're going to make it. Just work hard and you're going to make it. Thumbs up if you've heard that one. All you got to do is work hard and you're going to make it. All it takes is some hard work. You keep working hard. You know what? It took me a while to figure out that that is not true. Shay, I'm glad you're loving this. It took me a hot minute to figure out that just working hard doesn't always pay off. I had to start really paying attention to the people around me, the people that worked next to me on the conveyor belt when I worked in the processing plant for the Postal Service. I had to take a good hard look at the woman who had sacrificed her body, who was in ill health, who had heart issues, who had bad knees, who had a bad back, and yet was working hard, dumping sacks of magazines onto a conveyor belt. She was working hard, but it wasn't getting her where she wanted to go. Wasn't thinking it through, wasn't connecting the dots that this might not be leading me where I want to go. I wonder if you've had that belief passed on to you, that all it takes is hard work. I'm here to tell you that hard work is involved, absolutely, but it's not hard work just for the sake of working hard. Just sacrificing your time, your talent, your energy, and doing it with vigor and enthusiasm isn't enough. We have to be intentional about what we're working hard on. That's the key. It's not just hard work. And there are so many people, myself included, that absorbed that for so many years. Just work hard and you'll be fine. Working hard is part of it, but it's not everything. Okay, how about this one? Good enough is never good enough. Can I hear an amen from the perfectionists in the audience? Working hard, good enough is never good enough. That's a cultural thing. A lot of our parents grew up in really tough times. They were used to working hard. They were accustomed to having to claw their way to the top, if you will. But I'm here to tell you that good enough sometimes is good enough. It depends on what it is. It depends on what it is, and we get to choose. Even if our culture has told us for years, you have to be perfect, you have to be flawless, you can't make a mistake, or people are going to find out. Even if that's the case, we don't have to absorb that piece of our culture, that piece that says good enough is never good enough. We don't have to labor under the idea that we have to be perfect in every area of life. We just don't. We just don't. That came from our culture. That's where I absorbed it. That's where you absorbed it, from the way we were brought up, from the way we went to school. Nothing wrong with it. It just needs to be looked at. Am I being excellent in the areas where it matters? Right? We have to intentionally think about it. Carol, I am glad you're here, and good evening to you. Welcome, and I'm glad you jumped in. Yay! I love tonight's topic, and I hope that it's blessing you. I hope that you're taking a moment to think about some of the assumptions that you've made that may not be true, or they may not be true anymore. When I was growing up, I was the oldest of 6 children. Anytime we were going anywhere, it was a huge event. If you are part of a large family, you may know what I'm talking about. We just couldn't go to Cedar Point on a whim. It took weeks of planning, weeks of saving. It took lots of logistics. We had to make sure everybody had everything they need. We had to have a picnic cooler. It was a massive project. My mom, when she got ready to go somewhere, it was an event, and it took her days to plan. And I absorbed that as part of my culture. I absorbed it. And then when I was a young mom, and I had 3 children, and it was a beautiful day outside, and I looked at them and said, "You guys want to go to Cedar Point?" I felt like I had just broken out of prison. I hadn't spent weeks to plan it. I hadn't gotten crazy trying to make sure everybody had anything. It was a simple process for me to just look at my kids and go, "Hey, do you want to go with me to Cedar Point?" that that attitude, that necessity that was existent in my family, that we had to have all this time to be able to do anything. We had to have tons of notice. We couldn't do anything on the fly. That wasn't relevant for my situation. I had half the number of kids. I had different resources. I had my own car. But I was behaving as if, up until that point, that I didn't have a choice. Oh, Hunter, I'm glad you're here. Courtney, I'm glad you're here. And Sandy, I saw you. Give those kitties a hug for me. You may be able to see Zippy tonight if she pops in, although I think she went and hid in the closet, so maybe not. But if she's here, I'll corral her and show her to you, Sandy. All right, so our culture, those behaviors, those attitudes, those assumptions that mold how we grow and how we make our decisions, they're not always valid or relevant now, and it's important for us to choose them intentionally. So here's another one I want you to think about. Another piece of culture that infiltrated, I know for sure, the organization that I labored in for 31 years, 5 months and 9 days, that there is an intrinsic payoff for suffering. That just suffering alone entitles you to a promotion, entitles you to accolades, entitles you to a raise. This idea that I am suffering so much to be here that you owe me. That's a culture thing. Paul, I'm glad you're here. Missed you this morning. That is a cultural attitude that is prevalent not just in the organization where I worked. I'm sure you've seen it where you've worked too. There are people who think just because I'm miserable, you owe me something. And I'm here to tell you that no matter how strongly your culture has told you that, you can reconsider it, because suffering is not all it's cracked up to be. Is anybody else having trouble getting sound? Hunter just says she can't get sound. And I'm not sure. I've seen, I know Shay got sound because she made a comment. So yeah, if you guys will just comment in on there to make sure that you can hear me. And I'm hoping you can. I hope. So let's see. It might be just Hunter's issue. All right, I'm seeing a heart, so maybe that means yes, you can hear me. All right, Hunter, work it out, honey. I don't think it's you. We'll see. All right, Missy has sound, so we're good. We're moving on. Thanks, you guys, for the thumbs up, letting us know you can hear. Okay, so if you take a look at your life and you realize that you are suffering and you are miserable, I'm here to give you permission to stop. Stop suffering. You have my permission. Just tell them if anybody asks, how come you're not miserable? Oh, Shannon said I'm allowed to be happy today. Take it. It's my gift to you, because suffering doesn't earn us anything if it's suffering for suffering's sake. It comes right along there with the idea of hard work. If you're suffering for a purpose, if you have an end, a goal, if you know you're striving for something, that's a whole different thing than just being immersed in a culture of suffering where the people around you think that that's the way they have to be. I'm giving you permission. You don't have to suffer. That's a cultural pressure that sometimes our peers in the workplace think is really important. Sometimes I'm a Christian. Sometimes my fellow Christians think that suffering for suffering's sake makes them somehow better, gets them a little bit further down the road. Maybe they're closer to God than I am because they suffer more. Not necessarily the case. What are you suffering for? It's time for us to start looking at some of our assumptions, and these are just a few examples, and saying, okay, is this still relevant? Is this still relevant? If we go to a job where everybody is miserable, and misery is part of the package, that's a culture thing. And you don't have to buy into it. just because everybody else thinks that's how they have to show up for work, doesn't mean that you have to show up that way. And if it becomes impossible for you to push that off, to shed that negativity, then you have the option of choosing a different culture. You can put yourself in a different environment, one that's going to nurture you and support you. Yes, Carol's supportive there, and I love that. Yeah, we get to choose. You aren't stuck where you're at. You get to choose. If it's negative, if it's dragging you down, if it's a culture that doesn't help you to grow and thrive, then you get to choose to either change it, and if you can't change it, you get to leave it. Bottom line, we can do that. We have the ability. How about this? How about in relationships? How does the culture of relationships show up in your life? Have you ever said this? Or have you ever known anybody who said this? You know what? Everybody that I know is divorced, and it's just what happens. So, yeah, I don't think my marriage is going to make it. I looked around. Nobody else is married either, so I guess this is just how it goes. Well, that is a culture. That might be the customs, the norms of the social group that you're with right now. But what would happen in your marriage, in your relationships, if you chose to be surrounded in a culture that actually supports a strong marriage, that pushes you toward happiness and contentment, and that doesn't pull you away from it because of the attitudes and the assumptions of the other people who are there. We get to choose our friends. We become like the people that we spend the time with. Barbara, I am so glad you're here. Thank you for coming. We become like those people. We can choose the culture. And if we are fighting the culture in our relationships, if we are fighting to be able to stay committed to our husband, to stay committed to our wife, if we're fighting to be a caring, loving parent because we have friends who party and pull us away, we are choosing the culture that we're surrounding ourselves by, and we are actually choosing the peers that we're allowing to pressure us. We get to choose. How about this one? How about this widespread assumption in many cultures, many family cultures for sure? Money is the root of all evil. Well, is money the root of all evil? Is that worth thinking about? Is it worth thinking about if I were to be responsible and have more money? What kind of good would I be able to do with it? If we grow up in a family setting where people who have money are terrible and they're awful and they're wicked and they're evil, how successful are we going to be at making money? But we get to choose. Is that a belief system that we want to adopt? Is that BS that we want to keep listening to? That belief system, if it doesn't serve us and if it's not true, if we can look around and see examples where it's not, then it's worth considering. Is that where I want to spend my energy? Is that how I want to think? How about this one? Sherry's got it. It is the love of money that's the root of all evil. And that is true. Yeah. The love of money is a whole different ballgame than just money, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I am so grateful for every dollar that I earn, every dollar that my husband earns, because from that, we are able to bless. We are able to bless people in our community. We are able to bless people in Uganda. We are able to bless so many others. So our beliefs had to align with that. We aren't going to behave opposite of what we truly believe, right? Oh, Carol sees you. Hi, Zippy. And Al, I'm so glad you're here. How about this one? I'm too stupid to go to college. Or I was too stupid to go to college, as if it's not even on the table now. Did your culture convince you that you are too stupid to learn and to grow? I'm here to tell you that is a lie. That's a belief that deserves to be re-examined. That is a cultural legacy that you have my permission to re-examine and lay aside. Right, that's right. No, that is so not true. You are smart enough to go to college. You are smart enough to be a nurse. You are smart enough to be a doctor. You are smart enough to be a chiropractor, a marine biologist, a leadership coach. You are smart enough. And if your culture, as you were growing up, told you differently, it's time to take a look at that. It's time to take a look at that assumption and say, what if that's not true? What would I do if that wasn't true? Culture, it drives our behavior, and we have to be intentional about it. There are things that we tell ourselves. I can't be a good parent because my mom was terrible. I can't be a good parent. My dad was awful. I can't be a good parent. I can't stop screaming at my kids. That's how I grew up. Not true. Not true. Years ago, when I was first married, I would leave the cupboard's doors open in the kitchen. Every time I would open a cupboard door and then I would leave it open and then I would go off and do whatever. And my husband would come in and he would shut the cupboard door. And eventually he got tired of it. And he said, Shannon, you need to start shutting the cupboard doors. And I said, I can't help it. That's how I grew up. Culture. I can't help it. That's how I grew up. Will, I'm glad you're here. Culture says, I can't help it. That's how I grew up. I can't help it. That's just how I am. I can't help it. All my friends do it too. None of that serves us well. When we start assuming that we can't change, that we can't improve, that it's no use trying, we have allowed culture to constrict us in a way that is not appropriate, and it's within our control to change. I'm sure you're not surprised. I've been married, 36 years? I've been married 36 years. Within the first 3 months of being married, I miraculously learned how to shut cupboard doors. Yay! Much to my husband's thrilled, he was so excited. It was possible. It turns out that I actually was able to learn how to shut cupboard doors. It took me being aware of it. And so that comes to the key phrase that I want you to take away tonight as we talk about culture. When we are dealing with our culture, we can choose to be different, but we can't choose if we don't know our options. If we stay in a bubble and assume that everything that we've learned and done is 100% right, and there's no way possible that we can improve on it, we will never choose to step outside of that culture, those assumptions that we have about ourselves that we're too stupid or that we can't, or that women can't start businesses, or people don't stay married past 2 years. There was a relative in my family when I got married, told my mom, mark my words, she said, about my husband. She said, mark my words, he'll beat her. One of my relatives, her culture had convinced her that all men beat their wives. How sad is that? But you know it wasn't true. My husband has never raised a hand to me. I knew he wouldn't. That's not the culture we chose. I don't care how dysfunctional your culture has been. I want you to know there are other options. Our choices are a function of our awareness. If we keep our cultural blinders on, we will never know the options that we have out there. We will never know that we can choose to have a better life, to have a better job, to be happier, to be more content, to be more connected. All of those options exist. But if we're not aware of them because we keep our cultural blinders on, then we are selling ourselves short. So I'm here to tell you, I'm here to invite you, I'm here to implore you. Be intentional about what you believe, because our beliefs drive our behavior. Our beliefs drive our behavior. If you're frustrated with yourself because you just can't seem to get any traction, because you just can't seem to get a healthy relationship, because you just can't seem to find a job that works well, that allows you to contribute your best, if you're frustrated by those kinds of things, I want to invite you to stop blaming all of the people around you and take a look inside and say, what do I believe about that? What do I believe about work? Do I believe that it has to be miserable? Do I believe that nobody can ever get promoted without compromising their morals? Do I believe that? Do I believe that I don't deserve a healthy relationship? What has your culture, whether it was at school or at work or at home, maybe you were bullied, what did that culture do to your belief system? And now that you're aware of it, now that you're aware that it's not serving you, it's not accurate, now you're able to look at what are your options. What else could be true? What else could be true about how smart I am? Even though my dad, and this wasn't my case, but it might have been for you. Maybe your dad told you every day that you were stupid. Maybe your mom told you you were ugly. What if they were wrong? I'm here to tell you they were. And you're allowed to reconsider. You're allowed to take a look at it. There are many, many things that I got from my culture that I embrace and I lovingly hold, and I will not let them go. But there are also things that I got that were not true. They didn't align with my higher purpose. They didn't serve me well. They caused me stress and pressure and pain and judgment. If you're in that boat, now's the time. Take a look at the culture. Take a look at the beliefs and the attitudes and the customs that have shaped you and formed you. And using a compass of truth. If you're a Christian, that would be the Bible. Use the Bible as your compass. If you're not a Christian, what's your conscience tell you? What does love tell you? What does love tell you about those limiting beliefs that you've absorbed all these years? You took the pain, you took the frustration, you took all of that on. What if you don't have to? I'm here to tell you, you don't. You are free to choose. And the more aware you become of your options, the more wonderful your choices will be, and the more they will align with your higher purpose. That's it, my friends. I even went a little long, but I'm passionate about it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And even more importantly, I would love to hear, what are some of the limiting beliefs that have been holding you back? What have you believed about yourself that you realize now is not true? It's a bogus story. Maybe it's that you're too old to go to school. Maybe it's that you can't afford to learn. Maybe it's that you can't afford to go through a coaching program. Maybe you think that. It's not true. Sunday Night Live is a coaching program. You're here. It costs you nothing. What a gift, right? There is so much that we can do when we start considering, what if my assumption wasn't true? Like my good friend Michelle posted on Facebook today. Ask yourself the question, what if I'm wrong? What happens? Just consider it. I love you guys. I am so glad you're here. Ooh, that I could not let one of my clients go. That's Carol sharing. Yeah, a limiting belief that says I couldn't let one of my clients go. Did you let them go? Did you finally decide that it was time? I hope you did. If not, I hope you're gaining the courage. Yeah, we're allowed to say to people, thank you. This has been very useful. I've learned a lot. and it's time for you to move on. Isabel, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, some of these things that we pressure ourselves and we tell ourselves, I'm not allowed to XYZ. I'm not allowed to say no. I'm not allowed to tell somebody at the end of this month our contract will come to an end. Oh, Shay, I'm so glad that you are taking something good from this. And Carol, kudos to you for doing the brave, courageous thing and telling somebody it is time for us to part ways. Yeah, it takes some courage. And there are some cultures that would tell us that that is crazy and that's ridiculous and that is insane. And you can. Years ago, I've shared this story before, and I know I've got some postal people who are watching. Hi, Sylvia. Yeah, Sylvia knows. Sylvia knows that she can say, you know what? I don't want to be at this job anymore. This thing is sucking my life energy, and I've got places that want me. Sylvia knows what it's like, and I respect that so much. Years ago, when I worked at the post office, and I was sick, and I've shared this story with some of you. I was very sick, and I couldn't stay and work overtime. And the manager came up to me and said, Shannon, you can't go home. And I said, I can go home. In fact, I'm going home. I'm sick. You can't make me stay. The culture there was that the managers felt like they just could boss you around in every area of your life. And it turns out that in my case, my culture didn't support that. It's like, no, I have options and I'm going home now. So I will talk with you when I come back after I feel better. Yeah, sometimes it takes some courage to do that. I encourage you to look at where's the area in your life that you are letting a piece of culture shape you in a way that no longer serves you. All right, you guys, thank you, Carol, for chiming in. I love hearing that you took some action and did something that was culturally hard. Well done. Shay, I'm really, really glad that you needed this and that you got it. And for the rest of you that were here, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being committed and willing to thrive in change, to take time out on a Sunday night so that you can spend the rest of this week growing and applying what you've learned and practicing. I love you all. Mwah! Thank you for all the hearts. I love it. And I will talk to you all soon. Bye.